Thank you. Thank you for your kind reception, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Before I begin, before I do anything else, I just need to note something. It feels good to be having our union conference in a union hotel. And while on the subject of our conference, I want to make sure that full credit is given. Where are you, Cecily Meyer Cruz? Stand up. Where are you, Arlene Inoue? Stand up. Where are you, Arlene? Way in the back, Arlene Inoue. Thank you, our officer in charge of the conference. You just went through the core training, which was a high-quality training experience, and wouldn't have happened without UTLA's absolutely fantastic professional staff. Can you please stand up? Okay, so we've got the new hotel, and there's one other thing that's new, that's different from last year. Between the last leadership conference and today, I got married. Thank you. Please give a little hand for my wonderful wife, Carolina Salcedo. As if I didn't need any more proof that I am the luckiest man in the history of the world. Okay, folks, before I get down and begin with the policy issues and our future, I first want to say one thing to every person in this room. You know, when I meet new people, and when they find out that I'm a teacher, very often the person I'm meeting will make a little joke. They'll say, "Oh, you're a teacher. I better be careful what I say. I better not say any bad words." You know, then we both kind of laugh politely. The idea, apparently, is that in the view of the general public, we teachers are delicate little souls, and we're completely unaccustomed to hearing cursing or profanity of any kind. Now, obviously, those members of the public never taught middle school. You know, we educators who work in big city public schools, you know it, we've heard just about anything you can imagine. But there is one phrase that public school teachers and health and human services professionals rarely ever hear. Thank you. You know, for as long as there have been teachers, people have just sort of automatically taken for granted that all of the unbelievable effort and skill and dedication that it takes to make real learning happen every day, year after year, in every classroom in this city, they just take that for granted. But you know, don't listen to the media. You know that good teaching is not a miracle. It's difficult, hard, and yes, thankless work taken on by people who've made a choice to put their considerable talents to work making it a better world for their students in the community. But since we're speaking about people who've taken on tough jobs, I can go you one better. Right now, I'm in a room with several hundred people who already have one full-time, thankless job working as public school educators in LAUSD. But the people in this room, yeah, that's you. You've all taken on a second, tremendously complex and difficult job as your school's union rep. And just like it's never been harder than it is today to be a teacher, it's never been harder than it is today to be a chapter chair. So before beginning, I have to, from my heart and truly, and on behalf of all of the teachers and the health and human services professionals at each one of your schools, thank you for taking on this second tough, thankless job at a time of unprecedented, that's right. At a time of unprecedented peril to our profession and under the most challenging circumstances in the history of public education. Character and integrity are measured by the things that people do and by the burdens that they take on when times are the toughest. The teachers and the students at your school, and maybe more important, the future teachers and future students at your school, owe you a debt of gratitude for the work you're taking on and doing today and this year. And I thank you. Absolutely. Back in July of 2011, when I and the 6 other members of our officer team came on board, we faced an immediate set of challenges and an immediate set of attacks. At that point, it wasn't even certain that the necessary funding would be available to maintain our members' health benefits at ongoing levels, either from the state in terms of overall allocations to LAUSD, or from the district in terms of the district's willingness and the school boards and the superintendent's willingness to make employee benefits a priority. I don't know if you remember, but as recently as the spring of 2011, the district tried to strong-arm UTLA and the other LAUSD unions into using what we call the Prudent Benefit Reserve Fund for non-classroom budget priorities instead of health benefits. This year, we and the other unions stood firm, we bargained hard, and we won. In December, UTLA signed and ratified a health benefits agreement with the district that maintains benefits at their current levels for a 3-year period through the end of 2014. Our bargaining team deserves credit because in light of education funding crisis that's continuing to pound every single district in this state, it was a major accomplishment and a major victory. And I want you to remember, because here in LA, our eligibility provisions, the ones negotiated by UTLA, still include teachers who are working in substitute status. That means RIFT teachers who exercise their right to substitute while they're on the rehire waiting list, they have the ability to keep themselves and their dependents fully covered. And you know, that in addition to the fact that we are still one of the only school districts in the nation where employees don't have to pay a monthly premium for health care. That's not a small victory, that's a huge victory. And, by the way, you noticed I talked about the way things were before July of 2011 and the way things were after July 2011? Who showed up on the school board July 1st, 2011? Stand up, please, Bennett Kaiser. Also, UTLA negotiated, and in December the membership ratified what we called the Local Schools Stabilization Agreement. That agreement put an end to the giveaway of public school campuses to private operators under Yoli Flores Aguilar's Public School Choice Program. Oh, you can do better than that. Let me do Yoli Flores Aguilar's Public School Choice Program. Before that agreement, and that agreement halted the giveaways, entire campuses and many, many unionized teaching jobs were being drained away from the district, creating hundreds of rifts and layoffs beyond those that would be attributable either to enrollment loss or to state funding cuts. That agreement also put strict limits on reconstitutions. You know, in the 6 months prior to that stabilization agreement, 12 large secondary schools were reconstituted by the district, displacing well over 1,000 teachers. Since the stabilization agreement took effect, a grand total of 1 school has been reconstituted. Now, on that one case, the district maintains that that school, Manual Arts High School, the district claims that they had begun the reconstitution process prior to us ratifying the stabilization agreement. That's nonsense. Actually, there's another word that I would use in place of nonsense, but we got kids in the room. That's nonsense, and UTLA will continue to fight on that specific case. But overall, the limits on reconstitutions have been effective, and those pointless, destructive disruptions of schools and communities have receded. It's a huge win. One second. Could you give me a glass of water?
Thank you, Gerard.
That's better. Thank you. You know, it would be nearly impossible to look back at the last school year without talking about one of the most glaring examples of irresponsible administration and cynical scapegoating of teachers in the history of this district or any other district. You know what I'm talking about. I'm, of course, referring to the events surrounding Miramonte Elementary School. I've said it before and I'll say it again. What happened at Miramonte Elementary was a tragedy that turned into a media circus. And if there's any lesson that we've learned from what happened at Miramonte, it's a simple lesson. Opportunistic and ambitious district politicians will, without a second thought, throw clearly blameless teachers completely under the bus. And we also know those same politicians will baselessly slander innocent teachers for no other reason than to look tough in the media and to the public, and maybe most important, to deflect scrutiny from their own failures. Today, the Miramonte teachers have been released from their spell at their educational Guantanamo and are back at their school. And Miramonte folk, can you stand, please? We're a union. We know it could happen to any or every one of us. But you know that the district is continuing to try to use the media circus of Miramonte as an excuse to undercut teacher rights statewide and as a pretense to terrorize and intimidate LAUSD teachers at every school.
Give it a sleazy.
Thank you. We're getting there. Speaking of which, last February, the superintendent... Oh, come on, you can do better than that. The superintendent... Thank you. Issued an order to all site administrators. I don't know if you remember this. I know you do because you're chapter chairs. An order directing all site administrators to go through every teacher's and every health and human service professional's personnel file. The principals were directed to go on a fishing expedition going back 40 years. That's right, 40 years, in search of potential evidence, and I say that with the quotes, that could be used to go after our members. To give you an idea, it was so clear that this was nothing more than an opportunistic witch hunt. Even the administrators organization, AALA, the so-called principals union, even they objected. Absolutely, and they deserve credit for that. At the time, I made it clear to the superintendent and to any media who would listen that by pursuing this plan, Dacey would actually be making students less safe. He would be assuring that the district resources that should properly be used to investigate that relatively tiny handful of legitimate concerns about LAUSD employee conduct, those resources would instead be used to go after teachers for minor infractions that occurred, in some cases, decades earlier. Nonetheless, John Dacey plowed ahead. Now, I knew that the only way to counter this planned witch hunt, was to give you, the chapter chairs, the tools you would need to protect your members. UTLA needed to respond to any of these specious pseudo-investigations at the school site level. That meant that the responsibility fell to you, the chapter chairs. But it was, and is, UTLA's responsibility to give you the necessary tools and to hook you up with the necessary expertise to enable you to protect your members at your school site. I want to thank the hundreds of you who came to our citywide chapter chair witch hunt training, as we called it, on March 18th. In 2 short hours, you were able to receive copies of the brand new UTLA Member Defense Toolkit and to get practical training from our attorneys, officers, and staff on how to use that toolkit to protect your members. You, the chapter chairs of UTLA, you took that information back to your schools. At hundreds of sites, you used that toolkit and that practical training. You used it quickly, and you used it responsibly, and most important, we all used it in a coordinated fashion. As a result, the number of silly and specious write-ups and reassignments and credential reviews that have arisen to date out of the superintendent's file review witch hunt has been extremely small. You chapter chairs all deserve credit for that. And I'm going to ask you to once again, please give a hand to yourselves. You did that. And one last addition on the subject of scapegoating teachers and health and human services professionals. At the height of that media circus, 3 of our school board members, now I have to put the spaces in because I remember how you guys like it, 3 of our school board members, Monica Garcia, Nuri Martinez, and Tamar Gallitson, thank you, they held a press conference in Sacramento. During the media circus, they held a press conference in Sacramento. Those 3 school board members demanded that the governor and the legislature pass a law that would make it possible to dismiss a teacher based on accusations and innuendo rather than on facts and evidence. Well, fortunately, UTLA officers, in concert with our state-level affiliates, the California Teachers Association and the California Federation of Teachers, we were able to convince members of the state legislature that the goal of protecting children is a lot better served when everybody displays a commitment to finding the facts rather than a desire to play to the crowd and to render a verdict regardless of those facts. But we need to be forewarned. The LAUSD leadership has made it very clear that they intend to reintroduce that same bill in the next legislative session. The fight is not done. That's right, the fight is never done. Folks, now I'd like to change the subject a bit. I'd like to discuss something a little bit closer to your and to your members' pocketbooks. I'm of course talking about, I'll put the gap in there, furlough days. This last June, UTLA membership ratified what we call the Jobs Restoration Agreement. Now, Almost nobody calls it the Jobs Restoration Agreement. They call it the furlough agreement. And there's a good reason for that. It had furlough days in it. But I have a question for you. By your understanding, I'll do it by a show of hands, how many furlough days are going to happen this school year? How many people say we've got 10? Okay, let me get, okay. Put your hands down. How many say we have 0? Thank you, you're getting ahead of me. How many say we have between 10 and 0? Okay. I was going to say, how many say we have either 15 or 20? Well, we're all over the map, folks. And folks, brothers and sisters, I know it's crazy, but any one of those answers could be correct, depending on whether Proposition 30, the governor's funding initiative, passes or fails on the November ballot. And although Governor Brown this morning talked about how happy he was it was leading in the polls, that's one poll. Right now, coming up to November, it's too close to call. We could lose Prop 30. Now, passing Prop 30 will create the opportunity for LAUSD to have a full school year for the first time since 2008. Failure of Prop 30 will mean unprecedented cuts to school funding and unprecedented reductions to the school year throughout California. Under our local LAUSD agreement, our jobs restoration / furlough agreement, LAUSD employees could end up taking anywhere from between 0 and 10 furlough days next year. It's dependent on Prop 30. If Prop 30 passes, its passage would unlock the funds necessary to either reduce or eliminate the potential furlough days. However, if Prop 30 fails in November, by law, funding for the remainder of the 2012-13 school year will be reduced by the equivalent of 3 additional weeks of instruction. In other words, summer vacation would start somewhere around Mother's Day. Thank you. Someone is interested. Thank you very much. Apparently someone wants the early end calendar as well. Now, keep in mind, that shortening of the school year, that's not just LA. It's already state law. In every school district in California, including Los Angeles, employees will be looking at the prospect of a school year that's a full month shorter, with a corresponding reduction in pay. You still applauding? No, I didn't think so. That's not a local contract agreement, that's California law. That's the stakes for this year on Prop 30. Hang on, folks. The jobs restoration / furlough agreement, it was important, but it was a far from complete victory. I don't even want to call it a victory. Nonetheless, it was necessary. And it was worth it. The agreement saved more than 5,000 members' jobs. It saved it, thank you. That agreement saved adult education. It saved early, thank you. It saved early ed centers. It saved SRLDP. And a whole list of other programs from complete extinction. But it didn't save everybody. And more than 1,000 K-12 positions, many health and human service professional positions, and more than 1/3 of the teachers in the Division of Adult Ed were lost. When I got to tell you, folks, those weren't simply positions that were lost. Those were real human beings. They were members of our UTLA family with families of their own, and now they're gone. But we need to be very clear-eyed about what is actually driving these losses. In K-12, the largest share of those 1,000 plus lost teaching jobs, teaching positions, lost teaching careers, was due to declining enrollment in LAUSD, just like it was in the previous years. In the last 8 years, in the last 8 years, the K-12 student population of LAUSD has gone from 715,000 students to 561,000 students. The district has shrunk. That's a drop of 21%. That means 1/5 of those students are gone. Now, during that same period of time, the number of UTLA represented employees has dropped from 43,000 to about 36,000 last year to, not surprisingly, including adult ed, we're getting close to 30,000 right now. It is that bad. Now, I will talk to you more a little bit in a few moments about how we're addressing the enrollment drop, but the drop is real and it is continuing and we must address it. But I didn't want to leave discussing the jobs restoration / furlough agreement. Now, I'm fully aware that not everybody in this room voted in favor of ratifying that agreement. I know that many of you agonized over whether to vote to ratify it. You know, that wasn't an easy decision, and it was not an easy decision whether to bring it back to you for a vote in the first place either. I have to say two things. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who cast a ballot either for or against the tentative agreement, and for taking part in making a very, very difficult decision. Those of you who voted yes, you saved thousands of jobs and stopped the permanent dismantling of vital programs and services. Absolutely. But also, I want to thank you who voted no. Those of you who voted no sent an important and powerful message to the school board, to the superintendent, to the district, and for that matter, to the UTLA officers and board of directors. And that message was pretty clear. UTLA members are angry and tired.
We want to strike. Yes.
We're getting there.
Yes.
It will be addressed. Just as the district's priorities have demonstrated over and over again, LAUSD has shown a willingness to be cavalier about the needs of schools and students. The superintendent and the school board, or at least the current school board majority, not all of the school board, have felt free to adopt wildly destructive and irresponsible budgets, secure in the knowledge that teachers would come in and clean up their mess, that UTLA members would step up and do the right thing for students and community. And you know, for the last 4 years, we've done exactly that. But once again, one more time, the teachers and the health and human services professionals of LA, we've taken on the burden of essentially saving the district from itself. But our capacity and our willingness to bear that burden year after year is clearly coming to an end. Last June, that extremely close ratification vote sent a clear message. We teachers have begun to worry, justifiably, that by sacrificing and putting the needs of our students and our communities first, we educators are actually enabling the school board and the superintendent to continue, yes, year after year, to eliminate dedicated teachers, to eliminate necessary other professionals, to shorten the school year for every student, and just to generally undercut the value of an LAUSD education. Beginning today and going forward, we must be united to change that pattern. That has to be our fight as a union, and we must fight that fight together. But before that, our first and immediate fight has to be to get Proposition 30, the financial lifeline, passed by voters. If it fails, the floor will fall out from K-12 funding throughout California. If it fails, there won't be money to fight over. It really is that serious. You know, a few moments ago, I spoke about how the district has lost about 21% of its K-12 enrollment in the last 8 years, and about how that, as much as budget shortfalls, is driving the annual RIF process. You've probably already guessed what the largest portion of that enrollment loss is attributable to. That's right, non-unionized charter schools. You know, as one of our former UTLA vice presidents memorably stated, unorganized labor anywhere is a threat to organized labor everywhere. And, you know, moving our jobs out of LAUSD and into non-union charters is basically the educational equivalent of shipping factory jobs overseas. That's exactly what it is. But you need to understand, charter teachers are not our enemies. All charter teachers are nothing more than exploited workers. They're credentialed professionals just like you and me, who can be fired on the spot if they don't follow orders, or like at Crescendo, if they don't wear high heels. Seriously. They're teachers. They want to be able to advocate for their students without fearing for retribution from the boss. Most of them know that they would be much better off with union representation. And we have already organized a lot of them. Yes, yay. I don't know if you know this, UTLA currently represents about 1,000 teachers in independent charter schools. We do. We already represent more charter teachers than any other union in the country. I'm going to say it again. Charter school teachers are not our enemy. Non-union charter schools are. And the sooner we unionize those workplaces, the sooner we'll be able to eliminate the economic incentive to ship our jobs out of the district. Now, you've heard a lot at this conference about the threat that Proposition 32 poses to our rights, to our pay, and to our ability to function as a union. And I know you've heard a lot of media coverage, and you've heard a lot from your colleagues about something very heroic, about the heroic fight and the heroic strike that took place in Chicago. Now, notice I just mentioned Prop 32 and Chicago. I want to talk to you about how they are related. But first, I'm going to give you one more quote. It's one of the most memorable quotes in the history of the American labor movement. It was said by Walter Reuther. He was the president of the United Auto Workers of America. He said, "There's a direct relationship between the ballot box and the bread box. Anything that the union fights for and wins on the picket line and at the bargaining table can be taken away easily in the halls of the legislature." As you know, teachers and health and human services professionals of the Chicago Teachers Union recently concluded their strike. They stood firm on the front lines in the fight to defend public education, and not only that, they made sure that their negotiated settlement included language to assure that Chicago students have, and I'm using the words of their union president, that those students have the schools that they deserve. Two weeks ago at the monthly meeting of the UTLA House of Representatives, we had a special phone hookup that was set up from Chicago, and our House members heard an absolutely stirring report from Karen Lewis, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, about their gritty fight against the destructive reform policies of the Chicago School Board and Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And that's right. Oh, no, you can do better. And Rahm Emanuel. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to go fast through that one. And we also heard about their valiant their valiant fight on behalf of their students and their communities. On September 14th, UTLA members marched and picketed in solidarity with our Chicago brothers and sisters right here in LA. That's because right here in LA, we know that their fight is our fight. You know, in the United Teacher newspaper, I predicted that the CTU would be victorious and that many or most of the CTU's demands would be reflected in the final agreement, which turned out to be true. It was the right strike at the right time. However, because of an Illinois law that was passed in 2010, even though their strike was almost fully victorious, their contract will necessarily include the following elements. At least 30% of every Chicago teacher's evaluation will be tied directly to their students' test scores. Tenured teachers in Chicago who were rated as needs improvement using that test score-driven system will be subject to layoff regardless of their seniority. And the Chicago Public Schools will be able to skip laid-off teachers on the rehire list and bring in new hires in their place. You know, Walter Reuther was right. And what he said about the relationship between state legislation and the rights of workers is doubly true for teachers and other public employees. At the end of even the most successful and inspiring strike, the terms under which teachers and health and human services professionals work and live depend to a growing degree throughout the nation on what happens in the various state capitals and state legislatures. Now, the enemies of public education have also figured this out. In state after state, particularly in the Midwest, which was historically unionized, the enemies of public education have spent millions of dollars sponsoring legislation and/or ballot initiatives that have stripped public school teachers of their most basic rights and protections, reversing hard-won local victories. Their goal has always been the same: to pave the way for privatization of public schools and the elimination of teaching as a viable lifelong profession. If anywhere in this country it appears that organized and militant teachers and health and human services professionals have got a good shot at winning new rights or even maintaining their existing rights through strong local action, the current response of the anti-public education forces is to attempt to reverse our victories with hostile legislation. Here in California, teachers and health and human services professionals have had a historically strong and influential voice in the state legislative process. Our two state affiliates, CTA and CFT, have, along with UTLA, maintained a vigilant and vigorous presence in Sacramento. Most teachers and health and human services professionals I've spoken to feel that union resources spent in Sacramento to protect K-12 funding and to maintain basic employment rights is overall money well spent. The enemies of public education understand that too. They want to silence the voice of educators in the legislative and electoral processes. That's why they and their billionaire backers have put Prop 32 on the November ballot. Prop 32, if it's adopted, would destroy the ability of UTLA or of our state affiliates to participate effectively in the legislative process. The teacher voice, for all intents and purposes, would be silenced. Draconian and destructive laws, just like the Illinois 30% teacher evaluation statute, could be imposed on a statewide basis. And UTLA and its affiliates would be greatly constrained from participating in future statewide ballot measure elections. It's important to remember that. That means that if Prop 32 passes, it would be nearly impossible for educators to ever mount a campaign, a proposition campaign to reverse it. If Prop 32 is adopted, it will set back California teachers and health and human services professionals for years to come. We absolutely must defeat it. Now, absolutely. I'm going to close it up, but first, when I was coming in and listening to my radio, I heard a song that, here on the radio. It's by Talking Heads. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It goes, "This ain't no party. This ain't no disco. This ain't no fooling around." And I didn't know the title of that song. Do you know the title of that song? Yeah, it's called "Life During Wartime." That made me understand the song a little bit different. Make no mistake about it, folks. We are at war with forces who are attempting to destroy public schools. And just like that song is about, it's different now, it's different now. We are in changed circumstances. For many years, our union family has been about shared victories. There was the 1989 strike, where we got significant pay increases and a much greater voice in governance and control. There was the March on Sacramento, I don't know if you remember it, back in 2001, that resulted in double-digit raises for teachers and health and human services professionals throughout the state. And more recently, UTLA's successful Shine the Light pay raise campaign here in LAUSD back in 2006. We shared those victories because to be a family is to share joy. But being a family also means carrying and supporting and protecting each other when times are bad. And right now, I don't think anyone would argue. Times are very bad. But let me get back to the idea of life during wartime, to the idea that we must acknowledge our circumstances, the circumstances we're in. The idea that in order to effectively fight back against the forces we're facing, we must take stock of the enemy. It's not weakness for us to acknowledge that the forces who are attacking us have a lot of resources and have scored several victories across the country in recent years. We have to acknowledge that. Otherwise, we will have no hope of countering and eventually defeating those forces. And let's be clear, we will defeat them. Acknowledging challenges is not the same thing as surrender. Acknowledging challenges means that we use the tools that we have in our arsenal, all of them, all of the tools we have in our arsenal. We talked about the legislative process, and they're trying to take that tool away from us. And we talked about the tool that the Chicago Teachers Union used. All of our tools have to be available if we are to mount an effective fight. Chicago has shown us that the union's ultimate tool, a strike, yes, a strike, can be used and used wisely to fight back against the well-funded anti-teacher and anti-public education onslaught that we're facing right now. Everywhere across the country. It is happening everywhere across the country. And as I said before, in Chicago, it was the right strike at the right time. But we have to remember, for every Chicago strike of 2012, there are cautionary examples. For example, the Detroit teachers and their strike of 2006. When the Detroit teachers, after years of bullying and humiliation, decided that they just couldn't take it anymore. Out of righteous anger and righteous frustration, they went on strike. Suffice to say, and by the way, their righteous anger and their righteous frustration was every bit as valid as Chicago's and every bit as valid as ours. But in Detroit in 2006, suffice to say it didn't go well. Even though their cause was every bit as just as Chicago's cause this year, because it wasn't the right strike at the right time. As we, the teacher union leaders of Los Angeles, move forward, we must never be afraid to forcefully demand that our members be treated fairly. And we must be clear-eyed and logical in how we do it. We and all of our colleagues truly are living a life during wartime right now. But the only way we can win this war, the only way we can save public education in Los Angeles, is by staying disciplined and staying focused.
Organize.
Absolutely.
Organize.
Organize. Organize. Organize. Organize. Organize. Organize. Organize. You know, if there's a different way to achieve union power, I haven't heard of it. Folks, in Scripture, in the book of Job, there's a beautiful verse. It says, "When the Lord has tried me the most, it is then that I shall shine forth as gold." When I spoke earlier about character and integrity and about people who step up in difficult times, you know I was talking about you. The example that you set, standing up, leading your members, taking on responsibility when it would be very easy not to. Each one of you is a shining light of this union and of this district, and I am very proud to be your president. Together we will take on the challenges. We will face down the bullies and expose the charlatans. We will speak truth to power. And together, united together, we will win this. Thank you very much.